Jack Walker never thought a human like him would be invited to a royal alien feast. He was just a mechanic working on deep space cargo ships, fixing engines and patching broken metal. But one morning, on Station Aurelia 9, everything changed. Message came through a glowing blue scroll, delivered by a silent alien in golden armor. It said, "By command of the Shilari Royal Court, you are invited to the Feast of Moons." The seal bore the mark of the Queen herself. Jack showed it to his captain, who looked shocked. "No human has ever been invited to that," the captain said. "Are you sure it's real?" Jack nodded. "It has the Queen's seal." The captain lowered his voice. "Then you better be careful, Jack. The Solari don't invite guests for fun." Jack shrugged. "Maybe they just want to make peace." Later that day, a sleek silver shuttle arrived. Jack stepped inside and sat alone as the ship flew into the stars. The window showed a bright green planet with glowing rivers and floating mountains. It was beautiful, but something about it made his chest feel tight. When the ship landed, he was led into the royal palace. It wasn't made of stone or steel, but of living crystal. The walls changed colors as he passed, reflecting his heartbeat. Tall, thin aliens with pale silver skin and glowing eyes watched him closely. Some smiled, but most looked at him like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. A servant led him to a large chamber where soft music played and strange fruits floated in the air. The feast was like nothing Jack had seen before. 100 tables curved around a giant glowing orb in the center. Alien nobles of every kind were seated, tentacled beings, winged ones, even a few with no faces at all. At the head of the room sat the Queen, tall and shining, her face covered by a golden mask. Beside her were her daughters, 6 of them, each more beautiful and strange than the last. They wore gowns that shimmered like starlight, and their eyes never left Jack. A voice echoed through the chamber. "We welcome our honored guest, the human Jack Walker." The crowd cheered, soft and strange. Jack felt nervous, but stepped forward and bowed as he had seen in alien films. The Queen raised a finger, and everyone fell silent. "You have been chosen," she said slowly, her voice like wind over glass, "to witness a sacred tradition." A servant handed Jack a golden cup filled with glowing liquid. He hesitated, then drank. It tasted like nothing he could describe, sweet, hot, cold, and bitter all at once. Suddenly, he felt lightheaded. The Queen smiled, and her daughters stood from their chairs. They moved toward him like shadows made of silk. Surrounding him, one touched his arm, her skin warm and smooth. Another placed a glowing flower behind his ear. Jack looked around, confused. What is happening? One of the daughters leaned close and whispered, "You're the chosen one, Jack." "Chosen for what?" he asked, but she only smiled. The music stopped, and the Queen stood. "It is time," she said. "Let the choosing begin." A bright light filled the room, and everyone began to chant in a language Jack didn't understand. The daughters held his hands and guided him to the center of the orb. Inside it was quiet, like the world had vanished. Then he heard a voice, not aloud, but inside his head. "You were not brought here to eat, human," it said. "You were brought to be tasted." Jack's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" But no answer came. When the light faded, he was back in the hall, but everything had changed. The air felt heavy. The smiles of the aliens now seemed sharp. The Queen looked pleased, but her daughters looked hungry. Jack turned to leave, but the guards blocked the exit. "You may not leave," one said coldly. "The feast has just begun." And then, in the shadows behind the throne, he saw a figure, an old alien, face covered in scars, mouthing words silently to him. "Run before the night ends." Jack's hands trembled. He realized he hadn't been invited as a guest. He had been offered as a gift. Jack stood frozen as the golden doors shut behind him with a soft but final thud. The celebration had changed. The lights had dimmed. The music had become slow and strange. Alien nobles whispered in their glowing languages, their eyes always flicking toward him. Every smile now looked a little too wide, every movement a little too smooth. The queen's daughters were closer now, circling him slowly like stars orbiting a black hole. They didn't touch him, not yet, but their presence pressed. In around him, warm and electric, one of them, the tallest with violet eyes, stepped forward and placed her hand gently on his chest. "You feel it, don't you?" she said, her voice like silk dipped in fire. Jack didn't know what to say. His mouth had gone dry. She leaned closer, her breath cool against his ear. "You were chosen, not for your strength or your mind, but for something deeper." Her fingers glowed as they traced a line down his arm, and where she touched, a mark appeared pale and faint like a tattoo made of moonlight. He jerked back, but another daughter was already behind him, touching his shoulder, leaving another glowing mark. Jack tried to move away, but a third one appeared in front of him, smiling softly as she traced a final symbol on his forehead. Suddenly, the room gasped in harmony. The queen stood and raised her arms, her mask shining bright under the crystal lights. "The bonding is complete," she said. "The choosing is sealed." A cheer rose from the crowd, low and strange, like wind through hollow trees. Jack stumbled backward, bumping into a tall silver servant. "I don't understand," he whispered. "What did they do to me?" The servant looked down with empty eyes, his voice flat. "They marked you as claimed." "Claimed for what?" Jack asked, but no answer came instead. The servant turned and walked away into the crowd. Jack's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had to get out. Now he made his way across the room, trying not to run, pretending he was just tired. But the queen's daughters followed, keeping perfect pace. He reached a side door, golden and carved with alien symbols. He pushed it open and slipped inside, shutting it behind him. The noise from the feast faded instantly, replaced by silence. The hallway was narrow and glowing faintly blue. Jack walked quickly, then ran, turning corner after corner, not caring where it led. He found himself deep beneath the palace, in a part that looked forgotten. Vines crawled along the walls, and the floor was cracked. He passed a broken statue and saw writing scratched on the stone base. It was in human language, messy and rushed. "They don't kill you, not with claws or teeth," it said. "They bond with your soul and feed until nothing's left." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He turned sharply as he heard footsteps behind him. Light and slow, one of the daughters stood there, not smiling. Her face looked different here, softer, almost sad. "You should not be down here," she said. Jack raised his hands. "Stay away from me. I won't harm you," she said, stepping forward. "But they will if they find you. What do you want from me?" Jack asked. She looked at him carefully. "To survive," she whispered. "You must do what no other human ever has." Jack narrowed his eyes. "And what's that?" "You must resist the bond," she said, her voice almost shaking. "Reverse it before they drain you completely." Before Jack could ask more, the lights above flickered and a loud chime echoed through the walls. "They've noticed you're missing," she said. "Run now before the others find you." Jack ran, heart pounding, the marks on his skin now glowing brighter. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew one thing: he had been chosen, not for honor, but for survival. And the real feast hadn't even begun. Asterisk. Jack moved through the underground passage with only his breathing to guide him. The glowing marks on his skin were pulsing softly now, like they were alive. Each step he took made them glow brighter, and his chest began to burn, not from pain, but from something deeper, something pulling. The tunnels twisted like a maze, carved from the same living crystal as the palace above, but older, cracked and forgotten. Strange vines grew along the walls, giving off a green light and humming faintly like distant whispers. Jack stopped when he saw movement ahead. He crouched low, heart racing, and watched as a shadow drifted between the vines. But it wasn't one of the daughters. It was someone else, an alien, tall, thin, with dark gray skin and eyes that glowed softly blue. She didn't walk like the others from the palace. She limped slightly, and her robes were torn at the edges. Jack stood up slowly and called out, "Who are you?" The alien turned sharply, raising a hand that crackled with energy. But when she saw his marks, her expression changed from fear to pity. "You're the human," she said. "The Queen's new guest." Jack shook his head. "I'm not a guest. I'm a prisoner." "You're more than that," she said as she lowered her hand. "You've been bonded." "I didn't agree to that," he replied. "No one ever does," she said, walking toward him. "Come. We don't have long." She led him deeper into the tunnels until they entered a chamber filled with strange statues. They weren't statues, not really. They were bodies, frozen in crystal, human bodies. Jack stepped closer, heart sinking. There were at least 10 of them, all marked like him, eyes wide open. Forever trapped in the moment of fear. They were chosen. Alien said quietly, "Like you. What happened to them?" He asked. "The bonding drained them," she said. "The Queen's daughters take more than energy. They take the soul." Jack backed away from the frozen faces, his hands shaking. "I have to get this off me," he said, pointing to the marks on his arms. "You can't remove it," she said, "but you can fight it." She placed her hand gently on his forehead. The marks dimmed for a second, and he felt a cold rush through his body. Then a vision hit him like lightning. He saw the Queen's daughters wrapped in silver light, feeding on energy that flowed from him like rivers. He felt his strength weakening, his thoughts slipping away. But then, something pushed back a spark inside him that refused to fade. He gasped and fell to his knees, the vision vanishing. "You have resistance," she said. "That's rare in humans. What do I do?" he asked, struggling to breathe. She helped him up and whispered, "You must reverse the bond." "Reverse it how?" "By linking your will to theirs," she said. "But instead of giving, you take," Jack frowned. "You mean I have to feed off them?" She nodded slowly. "It is dangerous, and if you fail, they will take everything you are." Jack looked down at his glowing marks and clenched his fists. "I don't care," he said. "I'm not ending up like them." She handed him a small crystal shard, smooth and cold. "This will help you focus," she said. "But remember, you can't break the bond alone. You'll need one of them." "One of the daughters?" "Yes," she said. "One must willingly lower her guard, even for a second. That's when you strike." Jack looked at the crystal, and then at the frozen bodies around him. He knew he didn't have much time. The Queen wouldn't wait forever. And her daughters were still hunting. Jack stood in the silence of the crystal tomb, gripping the shard like a weapon. The air was cold here, colder than it should be, not because of temperature, but because of what had happened in these tunnels. Souls had faded here, and their memory still lingered like a thin mist. He didn't have time to mourn them. He had to survive. The alien guide, her name was Rhea, led him through a narrow crack in the stone. It opened into a chamber glowing with shifting lights, a secret training ground, forgotten by the Queen, hidden by rebels. There, Rhea taught him how to use the shard. It wasn't just a tool, it was a mirror for the mind. When Jack focused, the shard responded, pulsing gently with his thoughts. "The daughters feed by opening a path into you," she explained. "You must learn to reverse that path." It wasn't easy. The more he tried, the more the bond pushed back. Sometimes it felt like something inside him wanted to surrender. But Jack refused, over and over again. He didn't sleep for what felt like days. He learned how to hide his thoughts, how to block the bond, how to twist the connection when they tried to feed. But he knew training wasn't enough. To end the bond, he would have to return to the palace, disguised in servant robes and covered in ash to dull the glow of the marks. Jack slipped back into the royal halls. Everything looked the same, but now he could see it clearly. Every noble smiled too wide, every guard stood too still, every dancer's eyes followed him just a second too long. He wasn't a guest here. He was still prey. He crept past banquet rooms and glowing pools, careful to avoid the main chambers, but even then, the bond tugged at him. A faint pulse in the back of his mind. The daughters knew he was close. They could feel him now, in a shadowed hallway filled with floating lamps. Jack paused and leaned against the wall. He could hear voices ahead, whispers in the alien tongue. But one word repeated clearly, his name. He stepped closer and peeked around the corner. 3 of the daughters stood in a circle, their hands glowing faintly. Their eyes were closed, but their faces were tense. "They're searching," Rhea whispered behind him. "Don't let them find your thoughts." Jack closed his eyes, pressed the shard to his chest, and focused. He imagined a wall, thick and solid, and pushed the bond behind it, the glowing. On his skin dimmed, but one of the daughters opened her eyes. Not just opened, she turned and stared directly at him. He held his breath. Then she smiled, just a little, and walked away without a word. The other 2 followed, never even glancing. "His way, she saw you," Rhea said, "but she let you go. Why?" Jack asked. Rhea looked uncertain. Maybe she's the key." Jack nodded slowly. If one of them had hesitated, if one of them had shown mercy, that was his chance. Later that night, the queen called another feast, a celebration of the moon's rise. She said, but Jack knew better, it was a trap, a ceremony, a stage set for the final bonding. He would have to let them bring him in again. He would have to stand in the light, in front of them all, and wait for the one daughter who might hesitate. The shard burned in his hand, not with heat but with purpose. He walked back into the throne hall, masked as a humble guest, but this time, he carried a secret. He wasn't here to survive. He was here to break the chain. The throne hall was filled with light again. But this time it was different. The glow was deeper, warmer, almost alive. It moved like fog across the floor, curling around Jack's feet as he stepped inside. He was dressed like before, but his mind was not the same. Last time he was a guest, this time he was a weapon. Alien nobles filled the seats, their voices low, their faces calm. Only their eyes told the truth, and their eyes were watching him too closely. The queen sat on her high throne, her golden mask reflecting the swirling lights. Her daughters stood beside her, 6 radiant figures dressed in starlight. But one of them, Lyrian, the one who had seen him in the hallway, did not meet his gaze. Jack kept his breath steady as he stepped into the center of the chamber. The floor beneath him lit up, ancient symbols glowing blue. A deep chime echoed through the hall. The queen stood, her arms raised high. "The moon is full," she said, "and the bond shall be sealed." Music began to play, soft and strange, like voices underwater. The daughters began to move in a slow circle around Jack, their steps perfectly timed. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the bond stirring inside him. It was waking up, sensing them, opening itself without his control. But he held the shard in his hand, hidden in his sleeve. He focused, silently, carefully, preparing the reversal, one by one. The daughters reached out and touched him. Each touch sparked energy, flowing into his body like heat. But he didn't give in. He imagined the energy not flowing into him, but bouncing back, not being absorbed, but redirected. The shard pulsed, and a sharp pressure filled his head. He gritted his teeth, staying still as the ritual grew stronger. Suddenly, he felt Lyrian's hand on his chest. Her touch was different, not hungry like the others. It was gentle, uncertain, in that moment. She lowered her mind's guard. Jack struck. He focused every thought into the shard, every memory, every feeling of resistance. He turned the bond around and pushed it through her hand. She gasped, stepping back, her eyes wide. The ritual paused, the light flickered, and the queen leaned forward, sensing something was wrong. Jack didn't stop. He poured his will into the bond, his strength, his pain, his fire. Lyrian staggered and dropped to her knees, not in pain but in shock. She wasn't being drained. She was feeling what Jack felt, the fear, the confusion, the betrayal, and something else, human will, the stubborn kind that refused to break. The floor cracked under Jack's feet as the energy surged. A storm of light swirled around him, lifting the shard into the air. The queen shouted in a voice that shook the walls, "Stop him!" But the bond had already changed. The marks on Jack's skin flared bright. then faded completely. The others tried to touch him again, but their hands passed through as if he were made of wind. Lyrian looked up at him with tears in her silver eyes. "You broke it," she whispered. "No one has ever done that." Jack nodded slowly. "Then it's time for someone to pay." The palace began to tremble. Cracks spread across the crystal walls. The floating lights shattered like glass. The queen rose from her throne, her mask burning with heat. "You were a gift," she growled. "Now you are a curse." Jack didn't wait. He turned and ran toward the back of the hall, where Rhea had told him a hidden exit would open if the bond was broken. Behind him, chaos exploded. Screams, lightning, collapsing walls, the sound of 1,000 voices trying to stop one man. But Jack was no longer just a man. He was a storm moving through the heart of a dying palace, and he wasn't done yet. The palace shook violently as Jack sprinted through the twisting halls. Crystal shards rained from the ceiling, scattering like stars fallen from the sky. Behind him, the queen's voice thundered, cold and filled with rage. "You will not escape, human. The feast has only just begun." But Jack was already beyond the throne room. His heart pounding like a drum, Rhea appeared ahead. Her face lit by a faint blue glow. She held out a device small, humming with alien energy. "This will open a wormhole, but it's unstable," she warned. "If you want to survive, you must use it now." Jack took the device without hesitation. The daughter's footsteps echoed behind him, fast and certain. He barely had time to aim before activating it. A swirling portal door opened before him, shimmering with dangerous light. He dove in just as the daughters reached out, their hands grasping at empty air. The world spun violently, stars flashing past him like lightning. He landed hard on a rocky surface, far from the palace. Breathing heavily, he looked back. The wormhole flickered and closed behind him, leaving silence and darkness. But Jack's troubles were far from over. The queen was not defeated, and the bond still lingered in his mind. The daughters had left marks on his soul that pulsed with a dark rhythm. He felt their presence, watching, waiting. Rhea joined him, her eyes serious. "We have little time," she said. "The queen's empire will hunt you across the stars, but I know a place where you might find allies." Jack nodded, pain and determination burning in his chest. He was no longer just running for his life. He was fighting for the future of both humans and aliens. Alike, together, they set course for the hidden rebel world, a place where the queen's power did not reach, where Jack's resistance might turn into rebellion, but deep inside, Jack knew one thing clearly: the feast was far from over, and the queen's daughters still waited, hungry for their bond to be restored. Jack and Rhea arrived at the rebel world just as two suns set behind jagged mountains. The sky was painted in deep reds and purples, a sharp contrast to the cold silence Jack had left behind. The rebels welcomed them cautiously, but with hope, their faces worn from years of fighting the queen's rule. Jack knew this was not the end but a new beginning. He had broken the bond and escaped the feast. But the queen's power was still strong. More than that, he carried a secret, one that could change everything. One of the queen's daughters had hesitated during the ritual Lyrian, the one who had shown him mercy. Jack felt a strange connection to her, stronger than the marks on his skin. Rhea told him that their bond was unlike any before, a link that could unite or destroy. The rebels planned an attack to weaken the queen's hold. Jack was to lead a small team into the heart of the palace to face the queen one last time. But before the mission, Lyrian appeared through a hidden gate, her silver eyes full of conflict and hope. "You saved me from the bond," she said softly. "Now I choose to stand with you." Jack looked at her and nodded, feeling the weight of their shared fate. Together, they would fight not as enemies, but as allies. The final battle was fierce and chaotic. Crystal walls shattered. Energy beams lit the sky. Jack faced the queen. Her golden mask cracked, but her power undiminished. She sneered, "You are nothing but a broken pawn." But Jack was no pawn anymore. He stood tall, joined by Lyrian and the rebels. With a surge of will, he used the shard to sever the queen's bond over the empire. Light exploded across the palace, breaking chains and freeing minds. The queen screamed as her power faded. Her daughters collapsed one by one. Their hunger ended. Peace slowly returned to the empire, and the rebels cheered. Jack looked at Lyrian. "We changed the rules," he said. "Together." She smiled, and for the first time, the stars seemed to shine brighter. The feast was over, but a new story had just begun. ***.